to me, Korean natural farming is a machine that you put inputs into, and you get something weird out. So for instance, I can actually throw up the blue labs. So we were making labs one day, and we were talking and screwing around, and we knocked over a bunch of powdered spirulina that we were using for spirulina. If you mix it with a low percentage with water, and you use it when you're dunking your seed start plugs, when you're doing it in a commercial thing, totally prevents algae growth. There's some kind of compound in the spirulina that prevents algae from growing. So you can just kind of like soak them in the spirulina water, and it stops all that stuff from happening, because some people get really annoyed with it or whatever. So that was why we had it. So we were talking and knocked it over with our hands and spilled a bunch of spirulina into the labs. And it was like, well, it's not going to hurt anything. Like, it didn't ruin the labs, but whatever. So we just closed it up, and it came out looking like this. So it isolated the phycocyanin from the lactobacillus, or from the spirulina, in a way that didn't require heat or fire, which I couldn't find much documentation on. With all the other methods, you use a heat source for phycocyanin isolation. So it looks incredible. Like, the color you get out of it is just, you did it right if the color's right. But what's cool about it is it accelerates growth rates on plants, like a fast forward button, and it makes them grow much, much faster. But it's a thin layer. So what you do is you take off the curds off the top, and you'll be left with like a thinner neon blue layer that's a lighter density. You base that off, and that's your super lab. I call it super labs. But what's cool about it is, so I had an ex-girlfriend. One of the reasons why she's my ex-girlfriend, she didn't water my pepper starts that were 3 or 4 weeks old, and they were all in party cups, and they're all about, 4 to 6 inches tall, and they all were dried to the bone. You couldn't stick your finger in the soil, like, they were done, right? So the leaves were so dry that they were like paper. You crumble, So I was like, well, they're all toast, but I spent a lot of money on these, so I'm going to, throw everything in the kitchen sink to see if I can bring them back. So we used the super labs, just because I happened to have a big batch of it that I was going to use when I got back. And we took it and put it on all the peppers, and within 3 days, there was new growth nodes at all the dead leaves on almost all the peppers. I couldn't believe it. It resurrected them practically. It was insane. But it is really, really interesting stuff. And if anyone wants the recipe, you can go ahead and copy it. They're more than welcome to there. But basically, it's just kind of like a longer form of labs with the spirulina and a little bit of kelp. It works without the kelp, but if you don't have the kelp component in it, it has like a delayed response time on the plants. It seems like the auxins and stuff and the kelp are really accelerating the uptake and making more of a little bit more vigor and a little bit more of a snappy response to it. Again, that's purely speculation. It's just me screwing around with this recipe. I don't have any documentation on the hormone stuff of the plant on the inside of it in response, but it seems to have a much faster response with the kelp. So you're welcome to copy that or use it as you want.
It's incredible.
I'll have it up on my Instagram as well if anyone needs to go and forgets it.
Wow, this is awesome.
But what I think is that we could find other plants. Like, if spirulina does that, what do all the other plants do, right? Like, what happens if I take and powder or shred and do like silica, horsetail for silica, or stinging nettle for silica, or, all these other stuff with these lab ferments? I think is a new way that we can create mineral-based compounds, or even hormone-based compounds, or different ways to isolate things that we haven't played with yet. And I think too, playing with different strains of lactobacillus. So maybe trying one with kombucha versus kefir versus traditional lab collections, and looking into the differences between that and the different species there. And I think there's a lot of different ways that you can screw with this and get different results in a way that's repeatable.